Welcome back, or if it's your first time, I'm glad to have you here. I'm Matt Fendora, and you're tuned in to the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, where we journey together toward becoming the best version of ourselves. Using mind, body, heart, and spirit as the anchors of our podcast, join me as we set sail into the depths of self-discovery, unraveling the interconnected layers that shape our growth. If you resonate with today's conversation, consider subscribing to the podcast. Your support means the world to us and ensures you never miss an empowering episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Choose to Live, Love, and Grow podcast, your go-to destination for personal growth and empowerment. Whether you're a loyal listener or a newcomer, I'm grateful for your presence. Today, we have the opportunity to chat with Pauline Dougald. Pauline, founder of Art Diversion, is a peak performance coach with a unique blend of expertise in fine arts, interior design, neuroscience, and peak performance coaching. With certifications from Robbins-Madanes Institute, Flow Research Collective, and Precision Nutrition, Pauline pioneers a holistic approach to creativity and peak performance. Through Art Diversion, she offers a sanctuary for overthinkers, harnessing artistic expression and cutting-edge science to unlock intuition, creativity, and optimize self-performance. Her mission is to awaken dormant creative resilience and shift paradigms, offering new perspectives and solutions in both personal and business realms. Some of Pauline's proudest accomplishments include shifting her paradigm and starting Art Diversion coaching business with all the learning that came along with that, what makes Pauline's heart sing, dance, creatively solving problems, brainstorming, learning, teaching, expanding and shifting her perception, hot climates, and being in nature. Without further ado, here's Pauline. How are you doing today, Pauline?
I'm good, Matt. Thank you for a wonderful introduction.
I love talking about creativity because I feel like, at least in my perspective, it's something that I always had this limiting belief of I'm not creative. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm looking forward to this conversation of creativity. But before we get into that, I'd love to start off with a little bit of your backstory. And one interesting fact about you was you served 6 years in the Canadian Forces Reserve. So could you start off with talking about why did you do that and what did you do during those 6 years?
Sure, that was actually quite a bunch of years ago. And I immigrated from Russia into Canada. And so actually, fresh off the boat, the first year, I decided that I wanted to be part of the military. My reasons for that was I was drawn to those professions of action taking. I was drawn to that environment where people were getting things done and being together, and this environment of camaraderie. I was drawn to it almost instinctually. I don't even know why I wanted to do that. The opportunity was there and they accepted me and I went all in. I was in reserves and I experienced a lot of different things. I learned a lot. And as a result, I actually became very entrenched in that warrior mindset and warrior archetype, getting things done and helping others that you are in the team with. That was the biggest thing that I started with. I was still in college at that time. And when I began my career, that essentially began in the military. And what I learned there was the teamwork. You never left a man behind. You always supported each other. And you were only as strong as the team was strong. And I carried those values and that ethic throughout the rest of my life for many, many years until the time came to shift that mindset and go more into creative aspects. So the correlation between the warrior mindset and creativity has always existed, but for the most part, I always leaned on that beginning, that hard achievement, that kind of competitive mindset, doing things as best as you can, and also taking responsibility for what it is that I was creating. That was kind of instilled in me by the military and by environment at that time. So that was a great beginning, which helped me in a lot of ways, but I also noticed how it has hindered me in some ways now that I look back on it.
Hmm. How did it hinder you?
So it hindered me in a way that it was so heavily based in that warrior archetype. The warrior archetype is great. That's what gets things done. It's what keeps things safe. We need warriors no matter what. They are the ones that keep the community safe and protect and create boundaries. But it hinders creativity because it sometimes can become too rigid. When it becomes too rigid, then you tend to force things. You work more hours, it can cause burnout. You go straight through when there is an easier way around, because the warrior mindset does not like taking detours. It likes going through, it likes pushing, it likes continuing no matter what, which is good in some circumstances, but it's not good for creativity in general. And so that is what I learned. I strived so hard for so long that I caused myself to have burnouts many times in my past.
So, how do we combat the rigidness of the warrior archetype to where we could still allow creativity in our life?
That is a great question, because in that, and we are diving straight in with this, because this is a really overarching concept of allowing and incorporating those aspects of us that have been disowned. So one of the biggest pitfalls of the warrior archetype is the fear of vulnerability. Imagine you are being in a pack of wolves and or in a group of these hard achieving individuals. Showing weakness can be very detrimental to the group, to the perception of your strength. So the people in the warrior mindset are terrified of showing their weakness, because that would mean that they're the weakest link and everybody would essentially tear them apart. That is the belief that runs underneath that archetype. And so it becomes very difficult sometimes connecting with others on other ways. There are two archetypes that work in tandem with this, and that's the archetype of the warrior and archetype of the lover. When the warrior is so active, the other aspect, the lover aspect, sometimes can be dormant or even disowned, which prevents connection to other people, which prevents connection to the self, which then blocks creativity. So in order to overcome that, the person has to become brave enough to actually open up to people. And that is kind of like the warrior archetype is the bravest archetype of them all. But when it comes to vulnerability, that is the biggest challenge and the biggest struggle that individuals like that experience. And then it becomes the journey of integration, of bringing that other aspect, the polar opposite, integrating and allowing it to exist, which would then improve connection with others, connection with the self, relationship with creation process, and as a result, more flexibility, more resilience, and creative solutions to common problems.
So, if we take the archetype of the warrior and we balance that with the lover, that is how we're going to essentially improve or create the creativity in ourselves. Is that correct?
So that the creativity is our innate force. So we are born creative. Everybody has creativity within them. That is essentially their life force. If you look at Star Wars, it is the force. The force is the creative force, it's creativity. The way it shows up is unique to each individual. So some people fuel it and divert it into music. Some other people divert it into art and painting. Others divert it into dance. But there are other ways of creativity besides these common ones. There are ways to be creative with concepts. I was just listening to a podcast where the lawyer was talking how he is a creative storyteller. So if the lawyer can find creativity in storytelling to serve their clients, that is his own personal unique expression. And it could be gardening, it could be fixing cars, it could be landscaping, it could be cooking, it could be anything that makes you feel joyous and happy and excited. That is the biggest identifier of the creativity. And everybody has it to some extent, but what blocks it are those beliefs that A, I'm not creative, B, if I'm creative, I'm going to be thought of as weak, so I shouldn't show that side of me. There's also emotional nature that is connected to that, because emotions come together with that life force. And a lot of people, and me included, I have blocked emotions because I just didn't want to feel that. And when you don't feel emotions, you're not connected to creativity. All those things come together. And so that is our journey in life, to understand who are we really as a unique individual, how is our unique creativity is designed to work for ourselves, and then moving towards that by eliminating as many limiting beliefs as possible.
So a lot of times men struggle with the vulnerability aspect of things. So how can men improve their ability to be vulnerable to where they can connect with that lover and warrior archetype at the same time?
I think that is such a huge issue in our society right now. I think everybody struggles with that, women as well. But I think men, from what I have observed, men have experienced so much pressure on them to perform certain way, to be the certain way. And as a result, what has happened is they have incurred this concept of toxic masculinity. So if I'm too much man, then I'm called toxic. If I'm not, if I'm too vulnerable, then I'm called weak. I find that it is really difficult place for men to be right now because they don't really know how to be, how to express themselves, and they don't have very many role models that can show them what is the vulnerability really looks like. How am I supposed to be creative and strong at the same time? And so for that reason, I think the men's groups help tremendously in that regard. So if you have a close circle of specifically dedicated people who are on the same journey with the same theme and the same goal, they can find a way to trust each other so they support each other in a way to experiment what would it be like to show their vulnerability. And that is a really overarching global problem that I think we're facing, where there are no specific rituals for men to move from stage of their development to the next stage, and there are not a sufficient amount of leaders or elders who can guide them through that.
That's interesting that you say that because I started thinking of how we have for women, we have sweet 16s, you have that quinceanera, but men don't have that thing, where they celebrate, hey, I'm going from, growing out of puberty, I'm not a teenager anymore, I'm going from a boy to a man, and we don't necessarily have that. I've heard of things, but there's nothing really that distinguishes when that change really happens. It's just an expectation that it happens.
Well, and we only have the negative expression of that, which we can observe in gangs, because there they have certain stages that they celebrate in their way, but there could be better ways to set rituals and transition points for men that doesn't have to deal with a specific mentality that might not be helpful to the overall society.
Mhm. So, how long after you said earlier that your Canadian Forces Reserve was, pretty far in the past. So, how far after that, and how recent did you start Art Diversion?
Yes, so my military experience was about 20 years ago, and my art diversion, I started it 4 years ago. I started it at the beginning of COVID, right when the world was going into this massive chaos. And that is when I decided to begin this journey of self-exploration, but also a journey of trying to help others to make sense of this reality. When everything started becoming extremely complex, I had the tools and experience that was there to guide people to understand what it is that they were dealing with and try to understand themselves better.
What is the relationship between creativity and peak performance?
That is a great question, because our peak performance is directly related to creativity in such a way that if you are more creative, you're performing better. But at the same time, in order to be creative, you have to optimize yourself. You have to optimize your body, your mindset, your belief systems. Everything has to be working in a top shape in order for you to align to your kind of unique, true core self to allow for that creativity to flow. So the peak performance is a term and the creativity is a term. They both explain the aspects of ourselves that are required, that when merged, that is when something unique and special comes out. Creativity is how we express ourselves, but it's very difficult to express yourselves fully if you are not operating optimally. And what does that mean? If you don't have proper sleep, if your habits are not allowing your body to recover properly, if you're too distracted with negative news, with distracting notifications on the phone, with media, with everything, technology, if you don't have proper relationships created, and that constantly causes tension and chaos in your life, then you won't be able to be creative. If your mind and brain constantly looking for scary things and threats in outer environment, the creativity will definitely be blocked. So there's a fine line between being creative and just going into the fantasy world because you need to escape your current reality because it's so much stress and so it is so overwhelming. But the true creativity feels different. When the person is truly creative, they know themselves and they feel their purpose. And that becomes the expression of their life. And so to arrive to that point, there has to be a lot of work done in order to deprogram themselves from everything they have learned up until then from their outer external environment.
If you could provide 3 tips on how someone could improve their creativity starting today, what would those 3 tips be?
Absolutely, that is a very good question. In order for somebody to improve their creativity immediately, they have to first look back into the childhood, because that is usually where the seeds of creativity are, and identify what were the aspects or passing of the time that they enjoyed the most, what were the activities that they were participating in the most that gave them the most joy. If they track their joy back to the childhood, they will find what is their unique thing that they were born with. The next thing, so that would be the information. The next thing they could do is assess their current environment, assess themselves, and identify where are they at right now? Where are they starting? How good is their health? How good is the relationship with their self and their environment? Where are they starting essentially? And then to figure out where they want to go. And which means they need to look at their sleep patterns, look at their nutrition, look at their thoughts and beliefs. And that might be a more extensive process, but just overall, kind of gathering the large overview picture, bird's eye view onto where they are. Are they satisfied with their job? Are they frustrated? What are the most common emotions they're experiencing? Things like that. If they gather them under one umbrella and see where they're at, that would be tool number 2. And then the 3, that would be finding a community of people who are on the same path of expressing themselves better, of being more creative, aligning with their purpose, finding their goals, eliminating limiting beliefs, community of people who are supportive. So those 3 things could be very instrumental in helping people connect with their creativity, because we are more creative when we are together with other people, and we are more creative when we know who we are. Mm-hmm. And knowing where you come from. Those 3 things can really help a person to gauge and see who they are, where they come from, where they want to go, and find those supportive people who can help them get there.
So in regards to number 3, when you said finding your community of people, I find that is something can be difficult at times, especially for a man to go out and find, hey, this is my group of people who aren't just going to, be there, but they're actually going to help lift me up and help me grow. So how do we as men find that group of people to, whether that's our support group or that connection piece of creating our vulnerability and continuing to really inspire our creativity?
Yeah, and that is a very good point, because with all the online communities, with all the variety of options available, how do you even choose? That can be overwhelming in itself. But I I would suggest looking back into the childhood as well and looking at that original inspiration and seeing if there are other people who are interested in the same thing. So, for example, I spent a lot of years in motorsports. I love motorsport environment. It is something that brings me tremendous joy, and it really allows for self-expression and among many other things. And there exists a community of like-minded people who are already on the same page. One of the most prominent thoughts and awarenesses I had when going to the track, when I used to be going there, is that the moment you cross the gates, the moment you enter the paddock, you all of a sudden within this environment where everybody knows exactly what is happening. They are on the same page, they speak the same terminology. There is no need to explain yourself. Everybody knows why they are there. That community exists almost naturally by itself based on those predetermined rules and set of standards that people kind of already have. It's you go there to race and you understand that, and that is what you love, and you connect with others based on that shared passion. So that is one example. For others, it might be snowboarding, or it could be rock climbing, or it could be something of that nature, hiking, building trailers, building small cabins in the wood. I don't know. What is your passion that you would really like to talk to others about? Maybe it's building homes for homeless. That could be a community. So it's something that uplifts your spirit, something that you're passionate about, and where other people are already on the same page that know about this and are doing similar things, so you don't have to explain yourself too much. And out of that can evolve more friendship and more better communication and better even other smaller groups. But I think that is the beginning, and that's how I see where can you add value based on your experience, based on your talents and your passion. That is where you will find that uplifting group of individuals who also want to add value in some way in their own unique way.
Do you think as we grow up, the passions we have as children, they get pushed aside because of adulthood? Whether that's the outside influences saying, hey, you're not supposed to like that and you're not supposed to enjoy that, stop it.
Oh, yes, everything gets pushed aside. Passions get pushed aside. The things we believe in get shifted and changed based on the environment because it tells us certain things. The environment has a certain programming that it enforces upon children. And as they grow up, unless they look at it, they will continue carrying those beliefs that are not actually their own. They will believe that in order to get love, in order to get acceptance, and in order to be recognized and survive in this environment, you have to be a certain way, which is completely opposite to how we actually supposed to be. That is inauthentic. That is completely opposite of authenticity. What people need to do is really question, do I really believe that being like this is what is right? What is right within me? What do I believe? So where is the authenticity? Getting authentic can be a tricky process because of how much influence there is on people to conform. There's so much pressure, especially on men, to be a certain way. And it has started to change slightly, but I think there is still much more work to be done because they expect it to be strong, they expect it to be unemotional, they expect it to do all kinds of things, provide for the family, be the pillar of the community, while really disregarding their own feelings of how they are experiencing the world. And that has affected us for many, many years. This pressure to be a certain way imposed on young men has, I think, created more damage over the last while. And now we are faced with healing that, fixing that, accepting that it has happened in order to shift it for something better and integrate. Integration within the self, I think, is the most important part any person can do because we split ourselves in the moment when the environment pushes and pressures us to give up our passion. We split ourselves in two. So one aspect still wants to do that passion, but the other aspect resists that heavily. And that is what causes all the blocks to creativity.
Mm-hmm. One quote that always comes into my mind, and I've said it a couple times now on the podcast, just because I think it's so important, is a quote from Brene Brown where she says, "The opposite of belonging is fitting in." Because we just want to fit in, we want to be accepted. We start changing ourselves so people like us instead of, being authentic and feeling that sense of belonging. But then when you get, unfortunately, what ends up happening is when you feel like you're being authentic and you're not fitting in, you start to get that loneliness aspect of things, which is one of the biggest factors for men's mental health is loneliness and isolation. You start feeling that. And so then we start having this identity issue of who am I really? Do I sit here and belong and be authentic, or do I fit in so that I have company and there's people around me?
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the biggest issues, the desire to fit in and conform in order to stay safe in a tribal environment, which is which is opposite to the need of individuation. Like we all need to be special in our own special way, in our own unique way, but we also want to be part of the community. And one of the things that happens often with people who are on their personal development and growth journey is that they start outgrowing their peers and their family and their community. And that can be very scary because people don't recognize them anymore. They reject them because they have changed and grown. And the person starts feeling isolated because of that until they find a new group or develop or create a new peer group that can support them. They are in that void. But it is still better than living inauthentically out of fear of being ostracized and abandoned and rejected.
Mhm. So one other topic that I'm sure you talk about, be, when it comes to creativity and peak performance merging is flow state. So can you talk about what is flow state and then how do we get there?
Oh, yes, I can talk about flow state for a long time. It is my favorite subject. When I learned about the concept of flow state and how it has been studied by science, it all of a sudden gave me words and tools to describe what it is that I was searching for in my life through all the ways being creative and then going into all the analytical professions. The flow state is that state when we are perform our best and we feel our best. It can be identified through the scientific measurements because certain portions of the brain tune down and other portions of the brain amplify, the portions that are related to creativity and processing of information. So the flow state is that period of time. It could be called in the zone. The public speakers call it being in the pocket. There are all kinds of different terms for it, but it is that state where you don't have to think about what you're doing and you just almost doing it automatically, and it brings you an exceptional amount of joy and satisfaction. It is usually based on some kind of skill that you had to learn and master, and then when you actually do something with it, then it produces that. And there are five neurochemicals that show up together in the cocktail for that flow state. And the brain waves slow down to theta and sometimes even delta if people are very into something. So that is almost like sleep state because we are normally in beta mode, which is a consciousness. And in the flow state, you're able to slow down your brain waves to such an extent that the creative ideas are flowing easily. Your actions are corresponded to what it is that you're doing. You're getting good feedback of what it is that you're doing. And it all continues driving you through the dopamine reward system forward ahead on what it is that you're doing. So that state can be found in racing, for example. When somebody is hyper focused on racing, they will enter that state. The fighter pilots also enter in that in the zone. Somebody who is skiing or like high mountain skiing or snowboarding or doing any kind of action sports, they will enter into that in the flow in the zone because if they have trained and developed a skill, then they can focus on it and forget about all the things that they need to be thinking about. They just don't think anymore and they perform. And so that is the peak performance flow state that really amplifies our existence. We are biologically designed for it. It is evolutionary necessary for us to be in that state. And that really, the way that I see it is a perfect alignment of our inner unique being with our physical expression.
Is there a certain part of the brain that we have to enter to harness our creativity?
So the critical thinking is done on the front portions of the brain, like the front prefrontal lobe is kind of what we use for logic, for analysis, for all the day-to-day activities, and everything creative exists in the back of our brain. So in order for us to shift to that, we have to actually reduce the brain waves, like through all the activities that can help us get out of this overthinking state. And so that is kind of why I created Art Diversion, because I believe that art can create this diversion for the overthinking mind. So when you engage into some kind of artistic activity, some kind of creative process, you stop thinking so much and you just enter the flow. And so that is what has to happen in order to enter into that creative state. You have to stop overthinking, and that's easier said than done, but it's easiest when you involve your body in it. When some kind of a physical movement that is produced and gives you feedback that you can measure immediately, like you're walking on a plank of wood, for example, and you're trying to balance yourself, you get an immediate feedback where you are in space. And so that can help focus. And eventually, with that focus, you can act without thinking and do it automatically. And that is what then creates this aspect of flow state. And that is also related to creativity, because the more we are in the flow state, that reduced brain activity, the more ideas can float from one into the next. It's almost like in a dream state. In the dream state, all ideas are fluid. Everything is easy, and it just one thing turns to the next, and the new things emerge out of nowhere. You don't have to worry about how they emerge or how they look. They just come and float. And that is the same idea behind the flow state, because when you enter in that more and more, you're then priming yourself to being open to more ideas and more creativity to flow through you.
Do you think that there's a difference between men and women and how they approach getting into a flow state and actually obtaining getting into a flow state?
There is definitely some biological factors that affect flow state and creativity as well for men and women. And one of the things is that women are good at multitasking. So sometimes it can help with this fluidity, but at the same time, women are more prone to it's called the neuroticism trait. And women are more prone to noticing threats in the environment, which can keep them in the thinking and analytical, logical approach. So there is two sides to that coin. So men can focus better because they are designed for that direct precision, directive kind of focus, action taking, hunting. Hunting requires great focus. And so that can actually help them to get into the flow easier when women have a more dispersed approach and they tend to notice a lot of things at the same time, which is biologically necessary if you are looking after children and they're running everywhere. It's like multitasking is kind of a biological prerequisite for that to succeed. And there are also different aspects that relate to biological organisms, such as hormonal changes. Women go through hormonal changes a lot more than men do in some respects, although both, of course, have their influences. But sometimes on the women's side, it could be a bit more distracting from flow state and create more overthinking as a result. And on top of that, you add all kinds of limiting beliefs that are specific to men and women, and both have the capacity for not entering the flow state because of that. But in general, there's still research being done, and I'm not the one who is specifically doing that. but there are definitely differences between the way men and women enter flow state and access their creativity.
Do you think that is why there's that friction in relationships between husband and wife when the wife is thinking about all the different things that could happen or have to happen, and the man just wants to focus on whether that's one task or, oh, I need to solve this problem. It's because of those almost like the hunter, like you said, the hunter versus the caretaker mentality.
There is that for sure, but it's much more than that. I mean, the relationships in themselves usually bring for us the aspects that we need to work and resolve. The relationships usually are the mirror to ourselves and all the things that are standing in the way of our authentic true expression. Because nowhere in our existence do those things come out more than in interpersonal relationships. So they are serving us as a school, as a learning ground for what we are and what needs to shift. But also, when you think about relationships, we're not really relating as a person to person. We are relating as a nervous system to another person's nervous system. And whatever triggers, whatever blocks, whatever patterns that are present in us will trigger the patterns in another person. And that is what we will see reflected in the relationship itself. So it's much more than just biological evolutionary concepts. Of course, those play a role, but there's also past programming and patterns that come out of that usually come together. And it's funny how, for example, we talked at the beginning how the warrior and lover is the two opposite archetypes. They usually come together in relationships. So one person would be trying to solve the problem from the perspective of the warrior, just trying to get it done. And another person might be embodying the lover archetype, which is all about connection, which is all about preventing the breakdown in communication. And they might be resistant towards certain aspects that the warrior wants to do. And that might cause the conflict because both of them don't understand where the other party is coming from. When the warrior cares about solving a problem and keeping the family safe, the lover archetype cares about the connection and how everything is working within the relationship. And if they're not understanding that, they will constantly have conflicts because they would think that the other person does not understand their point of view. The warrior would be thinking, how can you not understand? It is so important to solve the problem right now. And you just talking about this connection, and then lover, from the lover perspective, they would be thinking, how can you possibly think about this problem when we have a connection breakdown right now? So it's all very deeply ingrained in us as a way to solve our own inadequacies through coming together and hopefully awakening to that aspect. That is why we are in relationships.
I feel like I have seen that in some places, so I can definitely relate in that aspect. Now that we are getting near the end of the podcast, I have three questions which I ask all guests, and these are over the questions of what the podcast is, which is live, love, and grow. So the first question I have it for you is, what advice can you share about how to create a life that leaves a positive impact on the world?
Wow, that is amazing question. The life worth of living a legacy from. It is something that everybody should be striving for. So how can they express themselves? And that comes back to authenticity. In order for the person to live the life worthy of living and live something of value behind them, they have to express themselves truly and authentically, which means they have to first uncover what it is, who they are, why did they come here to exist in this place. And one of the things that prevents people from getting to that is feeling that they're not enough. It is called the wound of self-worth. A lot of people have that. A lot of people have chosen to experience it in order to remember that they are worthy inherently. If somebody is alive, it means you are already worthy. You are in existence because if you weren't worthy, you wouldn't be supported by universe to exist. So you are already inherently worthy, inherently enough, and there's a reason for your uniqueness in the world. The world needs that special way in which you show up. And in order to live the life full of value and purpose, the person needs to understand and recognize that they have certain strengths, and the experiences that they have experienced throughout their life actually allowed them to gain those strengths to support their own unique expression. And if they lean into that, and if they focus on serving the world with that aspect of themselves that has been brought forth to add something to the tapestry of life. If they focus on that and recognize their worth and recognize that they're valuable already, that can be the basis for creating the life that will be beneficial for everybody around them and themselves as well.
Love that. The second question I have is, what are some practical ways people can cultivate self-love?
That is a great question because self-love seems like such a nebulous concept. It's difficult, it could be difficult for people to love themselves if they don't fully accept themselves. So if they don't recognize that they're worthy, that is going back to that wound of self-worth, if they don't recognize themselves as enough, as worthy, it would be difficult for them to love themselves. So the practical way is understanding first that your unique expression is valuable, and then boundaries. So that is kind of the very first aspect that they can practically implement boundaries. What do boundaries really mean? It means knowing when to say no to something. Because when you say no to something, you have more available to you to do with. Because when you say yes to everything, then you just disperse your energy towards all kinds of different things because you think they will get you something, some kind of validation, some kind of external approval. So learning to say no to protect your own energy, to protect your own self, which means kind of collecting yourself from everything that you have dispersed yourself out to, and then say no. It could be even saying no to notifications. Like you don't need to have your phone ringing all the time, diverting and sucking your attention from you in that regard. Then it's saying no to possibly hanging out with people that don't make you feel good. That is another boundary. Then there is a boundary for what do you put in your body? Maybe say no to some substances or chemicals or whatever part of food that we put into ourselves. Maybe saying no to coffee or sugar, whatever it is that causes you to feel less than. And then starting to see where else can you say no to protect your time and protect your energy. That is the very practical and very easy way to approach it and start approaching self-love, because when you have more energy for yourself, you have more ability to love yourself and accept all the ways in which you are.
Mm. So the third and final question I have for you is, what is one actionable tip someone can do today to grow 1% better?
That is a great question because 1% is all we need. As we are growing, 1% adds over time. And so we have talked about so many things that can already be used as that 1%. But having the positive intent, that could be that 1%. Having intention first thing in the morning that today I'm going to do 1% more. That in itself can be that 1%. The intention. I know I'm not perfect, but I could do 1% better, and that is my intention. So setting intention for the day. And then that intention can evolve and change and grow based on the experience, based on what you have seen as a result of setting that intention. But that can be in itself a 1% that can then over time can help a person shift to a totally different life and totally different perception. So for example, even if you're going to the gym and you don't know how to get to your goal, but if you do just one rep more, that is 1%. And the same can help in any other area of life.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pauline, how can people connect with you?
Absolutely. On my website, the artdiversion.com. There is various ways for connecting with me. I am on Instagram, art.diversion. I'm on YouTube. The links to that exist from my website. I have a podcast as well on 3 platforms. I'm on Facebook. So there are many ways to connect with me. And one of the ways is just go to my website, artdiversion.com. There's also, I have written a mini ebook of how to overcome creative blocks. So if anybody wanted to really look at that, they could download from my website and they could start looking at what is blocking their creativity and what actions to take to remove those blocks.
Mm-hmm. And how can the audience support you on your journey?
If the audience would like to subscribe to my YouTube channel, that would be very useful. Subscribe to my Instagram and just send me any feedback of what they would like me to talk about. That would be very useful and very supportive for me.
Awesome. Well, Pauline, it's really great having you on. I love talking about creativity, and I think you gave such actionable tips that I know people will take away something from today and implement, hopefully, right after listening to this podcast. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. I enjoyed this conversation tremendously, and I'm wishing everybody to really start looking at their creativity right now and starting uncovering it and diving deep, and because the world can be a much better place if we're just a little bit more creative.
Hey, can you do me a favor? If you enjoyed today's episode and took something away like I did, then could you take a minute and leave a 5-star review in what you took away? Your review could be the difference maker in continuing to get even more amazing guests. You are the reason I continue to create a new podcast every week. Thank you for your continued support. No matter what you choose to do, choose to live, love, and grow. Thank you, and have an outstanding day.